It's gonna delete.
All right.
Okay. So this video or this time together, rather this conversation. Forget the video. The conversation.
Yeah.
Is really for Race and Faith, and Race and Faith is an organization that started in 2014. I guess same time I started my tea time. I was really inspired, I guess. But I was teaching anti-racism classes with the Y, and I was doing that as part of my job when I worked for the Lutheran Church. And so after I left the Y, I really want to keep having those conversations going, but within the faith community, and make it much more accessible to the faith community, because in that kind of environment we're not talking about faith, and we do a lot of education, but I know racism is not intellectual, so people have these ideas based on belief systems, and in being in that environment that I was working in for a while, which was 97% white, I knew we weren't fully getting at some of the things that we needed to really get at. And that's because we weren't talking about faith explicitly. And you have to be really, really clear with, I've learned, I don't know how it is in your tradition, but with Christians, you got to be real specific and say, how is this, well, make the connections for people.
Yeah, for us, and a little bit of Eastern philosophy. I'm from India. I moved here when I was 6 years old. And when I moved here, I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I've grown up...
Straight from India.
Straight from Punjab, India, yeah. A small farm. A small farm in India where it's kind of warm.
Yeah.
To, basically freezing like it is now. But when we moved here, there's part of us that, within that culture in India, there is this openness to talk about politics and talk about religion and talk about faith. Where I feel like I wish that was much more the culture that exists here. So the work that you do is beautiful in that you open it up and you really do make it kind of explicit, not implicit, to say, hey, this racism has something to do with our lack of faith, and faith being sort of the spiritual underpinnings that connects every one of us. And if we're not connected to that part of us, how can we address these really difficult topics?
Right.
And how can we address the pain of the past, and the how do we move forward from that if we don't have that spiritual connection? So thank you for the work you do.
Child. I guess we all. You're welcome.
Yeah.
But we need to tell people who you are.
Sure.
So. We got like a few snippets of your upbringing, where you come from, but we don't know your name. We don't know what you do now. What's your religious affiliation, if you have any?
So my name is Pardeep Kaleka, and what I do now is a few different things. I am an author of The Gifts of Our Wounds, which details a story or memoir between me, growing up in India, or born in India, growing up in Milwaukee, and just kind of what happened on August 5th, 2012, when a white supremacist gunman walked into the Sikh temple of Wisconsin and murdered 6 people, one of those people being my father and temple president. And just the work that we had to do after that. And then my co-author in that book is a former white supremacist who started that same organization that the shooter belonged to. His name is Arnold Michaelis, and me and him do a lot of work traveling the nation, and we've been doing this for the past 7 years. It feels like there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah.
And sadly, when we started this whole campaign against hate, we would have thought that we would have been out of work by now.
Sure.
But it feels like there's more work now.
It's getting worse.
It's getting worse.
Well, the demons are able to show their faces more.
Put.
I don't know if it's getting actually worse. I think that's the illusion I think that most of us living in the States anyways been living behind, is like, civil rights and Dr. King and a few other significant people signed some papers, and now we're all kumbaya and all over the place. Where in actuality,
Yeah, we had some issues. We have some issues. We still have some issues.
Yeah, that was just a
Yeah.
that was one small step towards
Yeah.
hopefully. I mean, then you have to say, well, who's greater vision? Because everybody's not, as we can tell, then we're not all sharing the same vision. We're not all looking to create the same.
Well, we might share the same
We
vision.
yeah, I hope we do.
Yeah.
Oh, but I wanted to say Arnold is cool though.
Yeah.
Too, being able to meet him, because that sounds kind of scary, at least for me.
Yeah.
Thinking about being with somebody who was a straight up white
Racist,
terrorist.
Yeah, white terrorist.
Yeah, and now we're gonna be friends. Now that's redemption.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, when the shooting happened in 2012, you're right on as far as like Barack Obama was president. He was going for a second term in office. A lot of people had the whole narrative of this is a post-racial society. We live in a post-racial society because now you have a black president.
Right.
And I think a lot of people knew better.
Mm-hmm.
And knew that, just because you have one person elected to the highest position in the world.
Right, who they're treating like crap.
Exactly. Who they,
on an ongoing basis, showing
Exactly.
their racist butts
Exactly.
consistently
Exactly.
throughout his whole presidency. But go ahead.
No, you're right. And I think this is just a continuation of that. To say now where we sit with Trump and the politics of,
right.
Him hugging the flag and, that all is part of the work that we need to do. Yeah. So,
what is your religion now?
My religion is Sikhi. Sikhi stands for, the word just by itself stands for learner.
Learner. Okay.
And it came about in India, rural India, near the Pakistan, Kashmir border of India. And so to have what they had back then was a lot of just like reform thought, meaning that Hinduism and Islam were the two biggest religions of that region, and Sikhi really grew out of reform, and the reform was to say that everybody is equal in the eyes of God, and that the spirit of the Creator and the divine is within every man, woman, child, regardless of skin color, regardless of complexion, regardless of how much money you make or don't make, who you like or don't like, that the spirit or this energy is within every entity that exists. And the challenge really, Nanak, who's the founder of Sikhi.
Nanak?
Nanak, yeah. Guru Nanak. Guru means teacher.
Guru Nanak.
And so he, the spiritual challenge that he put out to people was that love each other's uniquenesses. It's to say, this is the challenge. You're not all going to look alike. You're not all going to, believe in the same things. But can you see the divine within the next person? And if you can't, see God in all, then you can't see God at all. And things like that. So, yeah, it was very much a reform religion of equality. So when you ask me the question, like, as far as like social justice issues and stuff like that, Sikhi was basically formed to take on social justice issues.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that does lead into my other question about, well, how does your faith, and already listening to you, how does your faith address racism? That sounds, just by its nature, as a way, which I think in most faiths by nature, they're not designed to be hateful.
No, and even Nanak would have said, like, not to be even tolerant of different races, but to be loving of different races. So not even was Sikhi not supposed to be just tolerant or be loving, or embracing. It should be loving and saying that, like, that is the challenge that we face, is that, because in India, you had people who were very fair complected. I'm kind of from the mountainy area of India, and then you go down south in India and you have people who are very, like, dark complected. And all of that exists within India. Say that colorism is very real.
Right.
And sometimes people, and over time, it just became that those that were lighter complected had a higher value in the eyes of the general public. And he would really ask people to, like, challenge that.
Right.
Is the idea of, like, worth, and how somebody is deemed as not having as much worth because of
How they look.
How they look.
Specifically skin color.
Who they liked, the job that they did, and all those things.
Wow.
So he was really taking on like socioeconomic challenges.
Right.
There was a lot of superstitions that were going on in India at that time. One of the biggest superstitions was around women and the lack of worth of women.
Mm.
And so there was this tradition called sati, and sati was basically when a married couple, and maybe the husband goes off to war, and oftentimes there was a lot of battles and wars and things like that. But if the man goes off and fights in the battle and he dies, then the widow was burned alive in her bed.
Shut your mouth. Mm.
Burned alive in her bed, and that was something that he came out and specifically denounced. He was like, this does not.
And they did that to her because she was a woman, you think?
They did it to her because they deemed her as property of the man, and that she was now a burden. Not thinking about her children,
right,
who are gonna be orphaned by both.
Right.
But they thought more about how the woman belonged to the man so much so that if he didn't exist,
she didn't need to exist.
Yep.
Now that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I might have to pull that one back out. But that's wow. That's deep.
But we still struggle with
yeah.
devaluing the worth of women.
Oh yeah.
And devaluing the worth of our daughters right now.
Oh man.
And I know this is not something that's unique to us.
Well, it's definitely I'm gonna have to marinate on that for a second.
Yeah. That's
like wow. Yes, the whole idea of just property. Not even thinking about the kids.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah.
So the guru teaching came along, challenged that type of behavior.
Yep.
Along with the colorism.
Yep. And
along with, it sounds like a whole other.
Yeah, a lot of like socioeconomic conditions that people were living in. He just thought, he basically said that a lot of people were living in the illusion. The illusion of what the world created for them. And they didn't find...
Like we are here in the U.S., the illusion. We kind of already talking about this illusion of being post-racial.
The illusions, yeah. And it's like we need to be like radically accepting of the truth to be able to move on. So one of the main words that he had was such. And such, and he comes from a long line of Dharma thinkers. Okay. So when we think about like the Buddha, when we think about Hinduism, Jainism, so Eastern philosophy really, and then Sikh came along. So it was an evolution of thought.
Right.
And he gets to be the youngest person who learns from all that past history and wisdom, and he takes it and he starts to incorporate it. And then that was how Sikh.
It's kind of remind me like the Baha'is.
Pretty much.
That's their thing too.
Exactly.
Baha'u'llah is like this evolution on Jesus and all of the thinkers before.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why I love talking about faith and religious thought and sit down and talking to people because it's so rich, It's like, for me as a Christian, I don't feel threatened by your story because I think your story enhances the whole story. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
But what I do want to ask you is, me being Christian and understanding where Christianity has definitely been taken and molded and shaped in a way that it's been used for oppression of Black and brown people, especially, I don't even got to say especially 400 years ago through the inception of slavery here. But even the way they use scripture now in the United States is backwards. But a lot of times, even a lot of kickback that comes back now through Christianity, it's like, how could you even serve, a Jesus, the white man's Jesus, that kind of language, because they okay slavery, or he said slavery was okay, and this kind of a thing. So I wanted to know if it was texts or have there been figures in your faith tradition where their messages, or maybe some of the sacred texts, if you have sacred texts, I'm assuming that you do.
Yeah, we do.
it's been taken and it's been used to oppress.
Yeah, it's been, I think, so our sacred book is called the Adi Granth.
Adi Granth.
Adi Granth, and which is like into the Bible, like into the Quran, like into the spiritual texts. And within those spiritual texts, at home I have a Bible, I have a Quran, I have a Guru Granth, I have a Torah, I have these books.
Yeah.
And when I look through them, I don't see separation.
Yeah.
I actually see a call for oneness.
Mm.
And I don't know how people open them up, but such as any tool, such as anything that somebody can use, something that is highly motivating people to see God in one another, to denounce God in one another.
Right.
So it feels like every good thing also has that sort of pendulum effect of bad.
Right.
And within our text, what has stuck out is basically this call for like oneness, this call to denounce sort of the illusions of separation, and not to say that we're not unique. We are all unique and special, but it is to say spiritually, fundamentally, the consciousness of Christ needs to be preserved, and I think that's, when I read the Bible, I'll read a part of the Bible that says something like, only through me shall you find the Father.
Right.
Right? And somebody can literally take that text and say, oh, only through me being a white Jesus.
Right.
Can you find the Father?
Right.
Right. And so they...
Well, that's what they did. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
So then they overprescribe so that
Right,
people
right,
that are literal to the
Yeah.
point that they take those words apart and use it, manipulate it.
Right.
Those people are trying to close you off to the actual Christ consciousness
Right.
that exists within people.
Right.
Because if you say only through me, and now you take out the me and stop personifying Christ and understand Christ to be the ideal of man, which
Right.
he should be the ideal of compassion.
Right.
He should be the ideal of forgiveness,
Right.
the ideal
Right.
of, all of these great principles. But what we do, because it's easier for people in this existence to understand from other people, so we personify.
Right.
A show that we watch the most is like the Kardashians,
Okay.
right? Because we want to watch people. We don't want to discuss ideas.
I can't see my face. I didn't want to see that face.
But in that same text, you can say, only through me shall you find the Father. But you can also say, only through me being the self. Me being every self. Me being like, if Christ was the ideal, he would say, look through your Christ self. Only through me being the Christ self
Right.
shall you find the Father. The Father being spirituality, being the soul, the consciousness, being something bigger than ourselves, which is God.
Right. So, the sacred book, again, say it one more time.
Guru Granth.
The Guru Granth.
Mm-hmm.
Guru Granth. You don't have any texts like that would be, or do you have statements around that people will be like, oh, see, if the Guru Granth says blah, 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 and so this gives me power to either oppress you or subjugate you, or it gives me power to separate you because the Guru Granth says I can.
You couldn't manipulate that book. So the other thing that Nanak said was, stop going to other people to translate the book for you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and read it yourself and learn. And so he basically took out the priesthood of Sikh.
Yes.
So he cut them, because at that time, Brahmins were very powerful. They were right next to sort of kings and queens.
Okay.
And so the priesthood in India, like the Pope.
Okay.
So the priesthood was there to execute the will of the king and the queen.
Right.
The monarchy. Okay, so Nanak basically said, you know what? Get rid of that. You yourself are a priest and a pope or anything.
Right.
You can go and find this for yourself.
Right.
So you learn to read.
And that's in Christianity too.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole priesthood of all believers. That's in the New Testament, where, I mean, essentially Paul is saying the same thing.
Yep.
We don't need that.
No.
Essentially
It's within many of the different faiths.
Oh yeah.
It is. It's an interfaith thing to say, I need to be able to advocate for your own education.
Right.
For you to get the word yourself.
Right.
And therefore you can't manipulate it then. But what happens is, over time we've gotten lazy. And we want people to spoon feed it for us. But then we don't understand that within
this is a truth. Okay? That's what my faith means. This